people are doing what they should be buying. Phil Camporelli is J.P. Morgan Asset Management Managing Director, along with trader Tom Hayes. Gentlemen, just as Hillary was explaining this, a major concern that's been brought up by the committee throughout the hearing so far is this question of whether the true employment and unemployment rate still remains very high. Now, while Powell says he suspects the labor supply and job creation will move up the rest of the year, let's talk about the overall impact on the recovery, even as we see as you look at this, you say to yourself, Phil, the S&P is within 1% of a record high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Liz, good to be with you again. Last time I was with you in May, we were expecting some excitement from the June FOMC meeting, and we got that excitement. As far as the labor market goes, this was the vaccination event for the Fed. Do you remember back in November, on November 9th, Pfizer comes out with their headline, that 90+ effective vaccine, and that pro-cyclical trade just went bonkers. And I believe that what the Fed did last Wednesday, their pivot, is really akin to that, because they removed, Liz, the whole part about the hardship from the virus in their statement and put in the vaccination part. Now, they fully expect, as Jerome Powell just said, that all of those jobs that are still missing, are going to come back over the next couple of months, coincidentally, as unemployment benefits start to roll off. That's the missing piece, Liz. That's not in anyone's model. So you look at initial jobless claims, you look at all these employment measures, and then you see non-farm payrolls disappointing, right? That, they believe, is temporary. And that is the key to this whole debate. If labor supply comes back, inflation will prove to be transitory, because you cannot, Liz, have a sustained rise in inflation without wage inflation picking up. And if we're right, and if Jerome Powell's right about labor supply, you're not going to get that wage inflation to really be the linchpin of sustained higher inflation. And all the Fed did last Wednesday for us was validate the pro-cyclical recovery. Investors should be cheering the Fed that they upgrade their real GDP growth to 7 and inflation to 3. What's the alternative? Us being in a pandemic, right? And there being no growth or no inflation.
I agree with that.
Right? So that's, they validated what we believe is going to be the earnings backdrop for high multiples right now.
Okay, so that validation, and Tom, you look at the conundrum that the Fed is kind of stuck in at the moment. We got to wait to see how employment does before we can figure out whether we need to raise rates. What is the trade in this sort of uneven and slightly uncertain atmosphere?
Yeah, well, Liz, the unemployment rate in February of last year was 3.5% before the pandemic. It's 5.8 now. So Powell has said, I'm going to keep the pedal to the metal. I'm driving the bus, not Bullard, which means no rate rises till 2023, no tapering till 2022. And that means those groups that have underperformed on inflation and tightening fears this year, tech, some utilities, staples, and healthcare, can now have a summertime bounce. And the names we've talked about on your show in the last few weeks, Splunk, Netflix, Amazon, they're all getting bid. So we like tech here, selected pockets, and we actually also think Chinese tech is going to follow this bounce in U.S. tech, and we used the weakness last week to add to BABA. Splunk, you saw today, up another 10%, up 20% since we talked about it on your show. And we do think that cyclical trade that Phil alluded to is going to come back towards the end of the year, because we still are in the early days of a new business cycle, just over a year into the new business cycle. So while energy and banks and cyclicals may take a rest here over the summer and tech picks up and we see the NASDAQ pushing higher, they will come back towards the end of the year in the early cycle.
Okay, I just want to let our viewers know that the S&P has just touched a new intraday high, up 25 points. The Dow as well, now up 119. A second ago was up about 120. Phil, great to see you. Tom, as always, thank you so much. All right, now, just as Amazon, which of course you just heard Tom mentioning, just as Amazon goes barreling into day 2,